Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. Today, we are excited to welcome Garry Kasparov back to the program. We're going to get his thoughts on the awful situation in Ukraine, but how things are going overall there. Also, new sanctions just announced moments ago against Russia in the wake of what's happened there this week. But we're also going to touch in more depth on his remarkable life and career, from chess prodigy to freedom fighter. And by the way, he has predicted what would happen in the Soviet Union, then Soviet Union, what would happen in Russia, what Putin's next move would be correctly for the better part of Putin's entire time in office and prior to as well. I mean, so you really, my overall impression in preparing for this interview is we should be listening to Garry Kasparov. When it comes to what Putin's next move is, I don't know that there's a better person to listen to. So just a bit about Garry before we bring him on. He was born in the former Soviet Union. By 12 years old, he would be the top child player in all of the USSR, the world under-20 champion at just 17. Look at him there. Just if you're watching on YouTube, it's like this little boy sitting there against grown men. And the best player in the entire world by age 22. He would remain at the top of his game for 2 decades. His matches were like something out of the movie Rocky. But in this case, the Russian almost always won. And in this case, we're rooting for the Russian, too. By 1996, he would even compete against IBM's supercomputer Deep Blue and win.
I knew that I could learn much better because my opponent would need more time to learn and to come back with a really sophisticated counter strategy.
But a year later, in a rematch, man lost to the machine, a defeat that would haunt Garry for years. It was through the game of chess that Garry Kasparov's eyes were opened to the West and to the power of democracy. It was life-changing, he says. By 2005, he decided to call it a career, putting his chessboard away to join the fledgling pro-democracy movement in Russia. He wanted his children to grow up in a truly free country, and to him, that meant a Russia without Vladimir Putin in charge. He would protest. He would attempt to run for office in a country that makes that virtually impossible against Putin, sometimes landing himself in jail. You're not allowed to protest in the streets in Russia. Even there, he was so popular that the guards wanted his autograph. But by 2013, it became clear he was no longer safe in his own country. And so he left his beloved Russia and family members, including his mother, behind. He would settle in New York City, where he told anyone and everyone as often as he possibly could about the threat Putin poses. At times he would be dismissed as an alarmist, but his warnings have proven right over and over again. It's almost eerie. In fact, he even wrote a book about all of this in 2015 after Putin's first invasion of Ukraine. Winter is Coming was the name. And yet 6 years later, here we are, witnessing the worst crisis in Europe since World War II. Garry Kasparov is the chairman of Renew Democracy Initiative. Great to have you back, Garry. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Megyn.
Let me just start with Winter is Coming, because I heard you say, I wrote a whole book about this. I've been talking about this for 20 years. I talk about it as much as I can about what Putin is likely to do. And it's always the more bellicose course. It's always the land grab. It's always he doesn't respond to weakness. He only respects strength. As you said to me the last time you were on, it's not a question of why, but why not for him. And yet no one listened. Now they still look at you and people like you who are saying, trust me, he's not going to back down. Trust me, he only responds to strength, and say, well, what's next? What's next? And you're kind of throwing your hands up in the air saying, I've written it all down for you. Read the book. It's the path is right there.
Yes, you're right. And it doesn't make me feel happy that I was right all along, because I thought that we could have learned from history, from World War II, pre-World War II, appeasement policies in Europe that failed so spectacularly. But nobody wanted to listen. I think it's part of human psychology, because the language of appeasement sounds nice. And I think the biggest mistake the free world made about Vladimir Putin and his regime They knew he was corrupt. They knew it was some kind of a mafia. They knew it was not a democracy, though they paid lip service and they called it some kind of hybrid democracy, the special democracy, sovereign democracy, whatever. I always say that the moment you see an adjective before the word democracy, it's something is wrong. But they never expected him to go that far because they thought, oh, he's already a mega billionaire. They have such a comfortable life. They steal money in Russia and they spend money and park money in the free world. Why to risk all? Not paying attention to his true intentions. And I'm not a shrink. I couldn't read his mind, so I'm not a parapsychologist. But I just listened to Vladimir Putin. And I grew up in the Soviet Union. I met enough KGB lieutenant colonels in my life to know how they thought. And I knew the moment I heard him, he was the minister and a part of the successor back in 1999 when he addressed his former KGB colleagues, technically former KGB colleagues at the headquarters in Lubyanka, saying, no former KGB officers, once KGB, always KGB. That, for me was the first warning because I knew what it meant. And he immediately, as a president of Russia, restored Soviet anthem. That was another warning sign. So it was an indication of his plans. And the moment I heard him say the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century, I knew he was up to something. And that's why I've been saying all along, while Vladimir Putin was our problem in Russia in the first decade of the century, eventually he would be everybody's problem if given the chance. And it's very unfortunate that not only his words, and again, he had plenty of them, said openly, like in Munich at Security Conference in Europe in 2007, 15 years ago, when he talked openly about the spheres of influence. That's a language straight from the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in 1939, and lay down his vision of Europe, that is, with NATO being pushed back to 1997 borders, and Russia would claim its rights, quote unquote, for direct or indirect control of former Soviet republics and even Eastern European former Soviet satellites. And then he followed it with attack against Republic of Georgia in 2008. With everything on display, I just couldn't understand. So what else was needed to understand that this man had serious plans? His intentions were not limited to becoming the richest. He wanted to take revenge for the loss or defeat, Soviet defeat in the Cold War. And also his philosophy, if you may use this word for his worldview, was based on the ideas that were so opposite to our values. And one of the key elements was violence. Vladimir Putin believes, as his favorite characters of history, Joseph Stalin or Ivan the Terrible, that violence is not just allowed, but it's desirable tool to control your subjects and also to spread your influence, both domestically and internationally.
You are unsparing in the book and very open and honest about U.S. leadership and how they've misjudged Putin, from George W. Bush to Barack Obama to Donald Trump to Joe Biden, who came after your book, but you've written enough and said enough publicly about him. I know how you feel. Let's just go back and start there for a bit, because I know with George W. Bush, you feel he backed himself into a corner with that "I looked into his eyes and saw his soul" remark in a way that sort of handicapped him from being stronger against Putin. If you wouldn't mind just setting the stage for where Putin was in his leadership then, right? Because you talk about how the democracy experiment in Russia was about 8 years. It took about 8 years from the time the Soviet Union fell to the time they elected a former KGB agent, and he started to slowly eradicate all those democratic reforms bit by bit. Didn't take him that long. So that's the young Putin at that time. And talk about what happened after 9/11 and how George W. Bush really hamstrung the United States from being stronger as he eroded those freedoms that had been budding not so long ago in Russia.
But since we have time, so I can afford a little detour in history, and I can say that I have pretty amazing record of criticizing 6 U.S. presidents. It started with my criticism of Bush 41. and then followed with Bill Clinton. So that's why, if I could present myself as a truly bipartisan or non-partisan critic of U.S. foreign policy based on facts. So that's why, when some people blame me after publication of my book, The Winter's Coming, for being so anti-Obama, I pointed out that, I had a pretty good record of going after any president who did, as I believe, something wrong vis-a-vis Russia, a former Soviet Union, and this part of the world. Speaking about this meeting in Slovenia in June that you mentioned, I think that was the beginning of Putin's rise as a leader of Russia, who managed to charm his Western counterparts, and he used his KGB knowledge. I think the tricks were quite primitive, but it did work. And we all know that one of the turning points in the conversation between Vladimir Putin and Bush 43 was the story that Putin told him, I believe invented, about him being baptized in the Soviet Union and wearing the cross, given by the mother, and how he always, had it on his chest and had to hide it because it was not, it wouldn't be welcome in KGB. Okay, baptized, cross in the KGB. Okay, give me a break. So, but it did work. Bush, a devoted Christian, he bought the story. And it created a bond. And we should give Putin credit. He knew how to work with people. He could read psychology. He could read people. That's why he was so successful in winning favors and then even friendship from some of the foreign leaders. And eventually, bringing them to the side, even using more direct means like bribes.
And Garry, just to interject before you continue, even when I interviewed Putin, and I spent a fair amount of time with him in 3 separate sit-downs, one of the first things he said to me, and he knew that I was the mother of 3 children, was how much his mother meant to him, what a close relationship he had with her. It was an obvious manipulation.
Absolutely, absolutely. He always, tried to play, for strengths or weaknesses of the opponent. It's well known that his first meeting with Angela Merkel, knowing that she did dislike dogs, he brought his dog, to the meeting. So this is again, he knew how to work with individuals at, this KGB school, also probably lessons from the streets of Leningrad, some of the sub-criminal culture where it was very important for survival, to actually read your counterpart, to read your friend or your enemy. And it did work with Bush. And then the moment came, 9/11. He was the first foreign leader calling Bush. He knew that was something that would stay in Bush's mind. It doesn't matter what he said, he just offered, condolences and full support. And he knew that he had Bush, on his side. And anything he did afterwards, I think that Bush had great difficulty until the invasion of Georgia in 2008, difficulty of looking at Putin's record. Looking at not only his record, in KGB, this pre-presidency, but also his record as a president, the Second Chechen War, the hostage crisis in Nordost, the theater in Moscow, when the hostages and terrorists were killed, many 150 roughly were killed by this North agent. Beslan, the school was burned, also terrorist attack. The school was burned to the ground. With 335 people being killed, more than half of them children, and the murders of political opponents, including Litvinenko, a former KGB spy who was poisoned by polonium-210 in London. So everything that could point out at Putin's true colors, Bush ignored, because I think the power of the first contact and also the Putin's willingness to always accommodate Bush, because they had many more meetings afterwards. And that's all, helped Putin to neutralize America's opposition, even at the point where they went after Yukos and Mikhail Khodorkovsky, the most successful oil company in Russia, the biggest one. And it was about to merge with one of the largest U.S. corporations to create the mega company that would hopefully, I thought, change the course of Russia, and it would bring our country into this global trade as a partner, not a spoiler. And Putin stopped it. In President Khodorkovsky privatized or reprivatized company gave it to his own buddies. And U.S. administration, okay, shrug their shoulders.
Because they seem to have an attitude of, look, all the stuff that's happening in Russia, that's Russia's problem. We have our own problems here on the side of the United States. We're now fighting a war against bin Laden, the Taliban, and we're not going to be able to focus on their human rights for the time being. But you make the case, okay, that's one thing, 9/11, but because you're a master strategist. That's how you achieved all of these chess titles and victories all your life. We should have been, as you write, quote, pressing our advantage as soon as the Berlin Wall came down. And instead, as soon as it came down, we pressed the brakes. We retreated. And so it wasn't just, after 9/11, we were busy. The two previous presidents who you said you criticized, H.W. and Clinton, didn't handle things the way they should have. Once we had the moral authority after the Berlin Wall fell.
Yes, going back to 1991, because it's relevant, since one of the very important moments in 1991 was Bush's famous speech in Kiev, Chicken Kiev speech, a few months before the collapse of the Soviet Union. And in this speech, allegedly penned by Condoleezza Rice, he warned Ukrainians about the pro-independence movement. He warned them not to follow their nationalists because it could lead to the collapse of the Soviet Union. And then that was a nightmare for Bush and his cabinet, for his state secretary of state, Jim Baker III. So they were terrified by the potential collapse of the Soviet Union because they didn't know how to handle it. It was a chaos, and they wanted to avoid it. So
let me just give you, because we cut us out of that, knowing that you might reference that, and we have a little soundbite of Bush 41 in what you call, again, the Chicken Kiev speech, 1991. Here he is.
In Moscow, I outlined our approach. We will support those in the center and the republics who pursue freedom, democracy, and economic liberty. We will determine our support not on the basis of personalities, but on the basis of principles. And we cannot tell you how to reform your society. We will not try to pick winners and losers in political competition between republics or between republics in the center. That is your business. It's not the business of the United States of America. Do not doubt our real commitment, however, to reform. Do not think we can presume to solve your problems for you.
So what's he trying to say there, Garry?
It was a clear message, stay with Gorbachev, reform, but don't disintegrate. And it's amazing. I was young. I was 28 in 1991, but I knew that the Soviet Union was doomed. And I was, I have to admit, shocked by this all-powerful American intelligence, because we heard stories about Pentagon and about CIA, and just looking just at the wrong things and making predictions that I knew would not materialize. On November 15th, 5 weeks before the collapse of the Soviet Union, Edward Shevardnadze, who was reappointed Soviet foreign minister, visited Washington, D.C. I was also there, I was receiving an award there. And I saw on TV, it's a big celebration. Bush and Baker and other members of cabinet, they received Shevardnadze, and they talked about a new dawn in Soviet-American relations. Again, 5 weeks before the collapse of the Soviet Union. Mm. And why it's important, because now we're seeing it's like a repetition of history. We are revisiting it. Because I think one of the problems of this administration, of all relevant agencies, like Pentagon, CIA, the state, is the same fear that if Ukraine wins the war and Putin's army is defeated, Crimea is returned back to Ukraine, and Putin regime collapses, what happens in Russia? So for me, it's like, seeing the sequel. And that's why I want to remind our audience about 1991. But it's amazing that now we are in 2022. We could have learned something. Mm-hmm. And as you said, the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War offered America a unique opportunity to rebuild the world, to actually to offer a new vision. In 1992, America was all powerful. You could have reformed United Nations. You could have demanded that countries would not be simply paying lip service to democratic procedures, but will carry general reforms. Democracy was a fashion. Everybody wanted to be democratic or at least look democratic. So, and then 8 years of Clinton, 8 Clinton years, and then, Al-Qaeda was ready to strike. The attack on America in 2001 and 9/11, I think, was a result of failure of imagination. It's what America needed is the same vision as Harry Truman administration had in 1946. At that time, it was building institutions to oppose communism, the threat of communism to Europe and to the rest of the world. And these institutions did work. They helped America to stop communism and then defeat it. And all presidents, Democrats and Republicans alike, they pushed this agenda, relying on the institutions built by Harry Truman and his team. We needed something similar, but Bill Clinton was not Harry Truman. But also Americans had a very different attitude. It's easy to blame the leader, but I think the mood of people who were behind Harry Truman, people who won the World War II, beating Germany and Japan, and who were willing to make sacrifices, was very different from the nation that was relieved in 1991, 1992, and thought about, okay, comfortable life. It's not surprising that Francis Fukuyama book, The End of History, was a bestseller. I have to admit, I also thought that, we would never deal again with the horrors of totalitarian past.
Yeah, but you're making a good point, though, because the mood of the country does in large part dictate policy. That would explain, if not excuse, Barack Obama's policy towards Putin, which really seemed to be almost on bended knee. And I don't think the American people felt that way, but I do think by the time he took office, we were war weary. We were 8, right? We were 7 years into the war against Al Qaeda and so on. And he seemed to have this, you tell me, but just this utopian view of what he was capable of and how if he just made nice with guys like Putin, we'd have a kinder, gentler, better world.
Yes, I think Obama's foreign policy was based on his naive beliefs that the world could be a better place if America retreat, it's not just going back to the trenches, because we had, these shifts in U.S. presidencies. You had more aggressive policy of Harry Truman, then Eisenhower more or less going back to the trenches, then JFK and Johnson, then Nixon went back to the trenches, trying to stop the war in Vietnam, actually finishing this war in Vietnam. So it was always, back and forth. But Obama's decision to dramatically change American foreign policy was based not only on the demand from the public. You're right. There was a mood. So people were tired of these wars, and they didn't understand. So what's it for America in Iraq or in Afghanistan? But it was ideological, and it was the growing segment of American society that demanded America's not only retreat but apology. And I think that led to very dangerous phenomena of as I said, significant segment of American society believing that America was not a solution, but rather a problem. And without America's playing an active role, they called world policemen, the world would be a better place. Amazingly, this now, when these people are just, laying down these arguments, they simply ignore the fact that, the Obama's retreat and apologies and reset policy with Russia and total, rejection of facts on the ground, led to the retreat of democracy globally. I don't think it's a mere coincidence that when you look at the Freedom House timeline, that last 16 years, democracy is on retreat. democracy has been steadily losing ground. And that's exactly the moment where Barack Obama laid down his vision of the future world and tried to make friends with all American foes. So from Russia to Iran to just you name it.
Well, and it's interesting because you can't, our viewers and listeners can't confuse our trying to force democracy on lands that clearly had no interest in it, places like Iraq or Afghanistan. I mean, there's some interest, but it's, these are not countries that are going to become beacons of democracy. And a country like Russia where they wanted democracy. There was a baby democracy. There I go. I have a word before it, but there was until they elected Putin and then he started to roll back all the reforms. That's different. Those two things are not the same.
Yes, but I would be a little bit more, generous to Iraqis and Afghanis. So whatever we say about America's intervention in Afghanistan, I mean, it helped hundreds of thousands of Afghans, especially women. It had an effect. And now, by the way, I'm confused when I see some far left groups, that advocated for Americans' withdrawal at any cost from Afghanistan. Now they're complaining about the plight of Afghani women, especially girls. Yeah, but it's this. Can you just connect these two things together? So,
and just to clarify what I'm saying, because there's a lot of the folks who don't want us to get involved right now in Ukraine in any more meaningful ways cite the Bush policies, the years of 43, saying our attempts to spread democracy were disastrous and cost a lot of American blood and treasure, and we should learn from our past and not go down that path again. Okay, that's one thing. We also have to learn from the Obama years and from the Trump years. The Obama years, on bended knee with roses towards guys like Putin doesn't work. It leads him to be more aggressive in the region, and not imposing severe consequences on him is more provocative than peaceful. But I'm just trying to start at that first lesson with respect to George W. Bush and his and Condi's and Cheney's attempts to spread democracy throughout parts of the world that seem to have very little interest in it. Go ahead.
Yes, no, it's a very important point. So now it's actually I would put Ukraine as a separate case study because Ukraine is not Iraq, it's not Afghanistan. Right. Ukrainians had their democracy. And this is something that the audience should understand when they look at Ukraine and Russia. Now they can understand the difference, but still, they even can, many know even the geography of Ukraine because you see the map, Ukrainian map, and all these cities that are now in the center of global attention. But many Ukrainians do speak Russian. So, and we hear arguments that Ukrainians and Russians are the same people. They're very, very close, brothers, sisters, maybe cousins. Yes and no. It's Ukrainian language is very close to Russian, but many Ukrainians in the East and the South, they speak Russian, the same Russian as Russians do, as I do. And, but Ukraine and Russia parted, not just in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, but the most important moment was in 1994, when Ukrainians had presidential elections and the sitting president, Leonid Kravchuk, lost elections and walked away. So Ukraine had probably the most important element of a democracy, a peaceful transit of power. Mm. And that's made the hell of a difference because Russia never had it. Yeltsin didn't want to leave power. Election in 1996 it was free but not fair. And of course, after Putin's appearance, it was no longer free or fair. That's so right. We all knew the result of the elections. That's why I said the difference between Russian politics and chess is that in chess we have fixed rules and unpredictable results. In Russia, rules change, but results stays the same.
It's not a game that smart man plays.
Yeah,
wait. Let me just stand you by there for 1 second, Garry, because I want to squeeze in something else and then come back to this because this is important. How we got here. I mean, I think you can't understand where to go, what the right next move is, without understanding how we got here. That's where I want to pick it up in 1 minute. Thank you for standing by. So, women are at a much higher risk of poor sleep quality and sleep deprivation due to hormonal changes. Did you know that? Hormonal changes that disrupt the circadian rhythm, negatively impacting your overall health. This can later lead to hot flashes and night sweats in up to 85% of women, making sleep seem all but impossible. And even if you put the cell phone down, you turn the lights off, you do all the stuff you're supposed to do to set yourself up for a good night's sleep, your body still needs one final trigger to let it know, okay, it's time to sleep. This trigger is a decrease in temperature. We heard that from our sleep expert, remember? But the decrease in temperature is important because it hacks your primal response. It convinces your body, hello, it's finally bedtime. That is where chilly sleep comes to the rescue. Whether you're a new mom or you just hate toss and turning in sweaty sheets all night, chilly sleep makes customizable, climate-controlled sleep solutions that help you improve your entire well-being. As part of an overall scientific study conducted by Wake Forest researchers, Chilly Sleep's cooling bed products were shown to significantly reduce the frequency of night sweats and the frequency of hot flashes. Head on over to chillysleep.com/MK to learn more about it. All right, they'll give you all the deets you need. And you can save 30% off the purchase of any new Cube or Uller sleep system. That's basically the Chilly Sleep offerings. They'll explain it on the website. It's well worth your time. Go check it out. This offer, by the way, is available exclusively for you, Megyn Kelly listeners, and only for a limited time. It's Chilly, CHILI, sleep.com/MK to take advantage of our exclusive discount and wake up refreshed and non-sweaty every day. So, Gary, we talked about sort of pre-41. We talked about, pre-43, I should say, 41, and then Bill Clinton, and now 43, and his comments about Putin's soul and so on. And now Obama had a couple of massive things happen during his presidency with respect to this region of the world. 2008 was right before he came into office when Putin took Georgia, when he invaded Georgia. And then 2014 is when he invaded Ukraine and got much more aggressive there. And there were some sanctions placed on Putin, which I think the Obama defenders would say were nice and severe and, appropriate. But it was a nothing. And you had been predicting all along, listen to me, this is going to result in a more aggressive Putin. He's not done. He doesn't respect responses like this. We've done absolutely nothing. You wait. He's going to do more.
Yep. When Putin attacked the Republic of Georgia, and technically it was not him, there was his shadow man, Medvedev, who was sitting there in 4 years. And by the way, that was also an important part of Putin's plan. He was not ready to usurp power after his first 2 terms. He could sense that the moment was not right. So he needed someone who could give him this 4 years break. And for me, the last indication of his plans to stay in power forever was his decision, Putin's decision, to stay as a prime minister. If he wanted to retire, if he wanted to enjoy life, and he was already a mega billionaire, I'm sure he could have done that without any difficulties. Even with all the crimes he committed before, I'm sure he'll find, enough understanding in the free world to close eyes for that. And Russia would move into his new Medvedev era, liberalization. So that's what everybody expected. But he stayed behind Medvedev. Technically, by Russian constitution, by the law of the land, Medvedev could have fired Putin with a stroke of his pen. But in mafia-like structures, in dictatorships, it's not about official position, but it's about unofficial grip on power. Technically, Stalin was never the head of the state, but he was calling all the shots. Same with Putin. And to my surprise and horror, Americans and Europeans have been spending years, numerous attempts to court Medvedev and his entourage, trying to sort of build relations and to offer Medvedev some kind of political clout to make sure that Putin would never come back. Of course, it failed, and the aggression against the Republic of Georgia was the first sign that Putin was ready to move. And his speech in Munich was not just a declaration, but was a plan. And Obama's first act was an offer for a policy of reset.
Yeah, the reset
with
button
Russia.
with Hillary Clinton. We have that
Yes,
actually on tape, that moment.
absolutely.
She sat there and she gave this button that was supposed to say reset in Russian. And I know you've pointed out that's not what it said. We misspelled it.
Yeah,
what did it say in fact?
Yeah, it was overweight actually. Yes, it was totally opposite. They added, 2 letters. Somebody State Department, blew it up. Yeah.
So embarrassing.
So
it
was just, it was a doomed policy. And it started with a big mistake, in definition.
Yeah. And then you had Obama caught on tape saying to Medvedev, I just need more flexibility after the election.
But that was 2012 already.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the after attack on the Republic of Georgia, Americans basically ignored it. Europeans spent months trying to make sure that the blame is split evenly between Russia and the Republic of Georgia, trying to find any plausible explanation to blame former President of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, for provoking Russia.
Because then we don't have to get involved. We don't have to get involved.
Oh, yeah, but Saakashvili knew that it was imminent. Invasion was imminent. And after the invasion, in August 2008, I wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal saying Ukraine would be next. And when people asked me, how did I know? I said, I looked at the map. And it was very clear. Putin wanted to make sure that, no former Soviet republic, independent states now, would join NATO. And Georgia was moving in this direction westward. He stopped it. And of course, Ukraine was a much bigger target. And for me, it was just a matter of time. Putin would be looking for a right moment to attack. And also, you could hear that, this growing frustration in the tone of Russian propaganda. They have not attacked Ukraine yet, because it's important to remember that since 1991 to 2014, all Russian presidents, Yeltsin, Putin, then Medvedev, and then Putin, signed numerous treaties with Ukraine. And Russia made not a single demand about Ukrainian territory, about an inch of Ukrainian territory. And all these treaties, agreements, have been ratified by several Russian parliaments. So the uniqueness of the Crimea annexation was that it had no diplomatic prelude. Even Adolf Hitler or Saddam Hussein, they tried to pretend that they had claims. They were talking about Dancing Corridor as Hitler, or Saddam Hussein about Kuwait as being, taken away from Iraq by British colonial powers. Putin didn't even bother. I knew that he would act when he thought he could do that. And obviously, Obama's policy encouraged him, because prior to the Crimea, we had few important moments that convinced Putin that Obama would not act. One is, let's again remind our audience, it's a green revolution in Iran in 2009. I know that many Iranians waited for Americans at least to offer moral support. Nothing. Right. They let Iranian mullahs to destroy it. And I think the first months of the revolution, the Iranian government, the Iranian dictatorship was very cautious, ultra cautious, because they didn't know what would be American reaction. Don't forget, American troops were standing next door in Iraq. So recognizing America would not intervene, they crushed it. Then, of course, Arab Spring. And I think it was quite a disastrous America's response, because, again, it required policy. It was something has been changing. And America was, as we know, leading from behind. And I'm not talking about the tragedy of Benghazi. The turning point from Putin's perspective was Syria. That's where Americans could make all the difference. And I have no doubt Bashar al-Assad used chemical weapons from having Putin's permission. I think for Putin it was a test, and America failed the test. Obama was ready to strike and then backed off.
What about the ousting back, in terms of our policy? I mean, we are said to have helped oust the pro-Russian Ukrainian leader, Yanukovych, right? In what Russia and Putin describe as a coup. And Putin's defenders say, if I have my chronology right, that's one of the reasons he took Crimea. It's just he'd had it. He was sick of being pushed around, and he was trying to restore the scales of justice. Okay, I'm just giving you the other side.
Ukrainians had their first Maidan, the first protest, back in 2004.
Yep.
Because, as I mentioned already, they elected a challenger to become a president in 1994. So they ousted by ballot, not by bullets, by ballot, the first president of Ukraine, Leonid Kravchuk. And they were very sensitive to any attempts to stay in power against their will. And they knew that election in 2004 was stolen, and that's why we saw a protest on Maidan. It was fairly peaceful because Yanukovych didn't have the same kind of backing from Russia, and he agreed, just to have a third ballot, and it was fair elections, and he lost. By the way, to tell you that Ukraine was a democracy, the same Yanukovych came back 5 years later because Ukrainians were not happy with Yushchenko and with his coalition. So the country changed presidents, as the gloves in a good or bad weather. That's a democracy. It was a free country. Mm-hmm. Yes, corrupt. You can't deny it. Not, very successful economically. Yes, but it was a free country. That was a fundamental difference between Ukrainians living in the east of Ukraine, who had the same background as Russians living on the other side of the border, spoke the same language, read probably the same newspapers in the Soviet Union, watched the same movies, but they used to live in a free country, and they were very sensitive to any attempts to force them accepting a president, a ruler they didn't like. Mm-hmm. And also, it's 2004. Now, you talked about 2014. That was very violent because Yanukovych already had full backing of Putin, and he wanted to push Ukraine back from what nation wanted, joining Europe. And he decided to denounce the agreement with the European Union, and Ukrainians protested. And then he used force. He shot some people. And then we had a second Maidan. It was not as peaceful as the first one. No dances. There was a fight. Dozens of people, actually probably about 200 were killed. But Ukrainians won the battle in Kyiv because the nation didn't want Yanukovych to turn Ukraine into Russian satellite. I didn't see Americans there. And again, the moment when you hear Putin's arguments, America was behind it, I could see Russian troops in Syria. I could see Russian bombers destroying rebel strongholds and carpet bombing Aleppo. I could see now Russian militants across Africa, and it's all prior to latest invasion of Ukraine. I didn't see Americans intervening directly in the Ukrainian revolution. Whether it was a support, maybe, but it's probably insignificant because as someone who was involved in pro-democracy movement in Russia, I can tell you we never had any direct or even indirect support from Americans. Yes, sympathy, yes. Being invited to Spaso House, the residence of American ambassador, yes. Many Russian NGOs received some grants from American-led organizations, though, again, my organization never did it. But again, when you look at the even amount of these grants, it's just a drop in an ocean compared to the amounts of funds that Putin regime could rally to create some fake organizations that fought back. And of course, amount of money Putin has been using effectively supporting dictators around the world and buying favors from Western politicians like Gerhard Schroeder. So going back to 2013, that's for me was a very important moment. Assad had to be ousted because Obama said, President of the United States said, using chemical weapons, that's the red line.
That's the red line.
And he stopped short. And I knew that's an open invitation to Putin. I remember I think I was on O'Donnell show, The Last Word, and we had an argument. I said, that's something that would resonate, actually would have an effect beyond Middle East. And I was dismissed. Okay, Crimea was inevitable. And also, a year earlier, you all remember, debates, Obama-Romney. And Mitt Romney said something that, now it's nobody argues. Russia was our, American, number one geopolitical foe. Obama's reaction, it's this, you are a dinosaur. You just, you belong to a political stone age. It's Cold War. We live in a different era. Maybe you missed, this time. It's a calendar. It's 21st century. Okay. I still think Obama has to apologize.
Yeah.
For being so wrong And again, that's a message that Putin got.
He has
so
been
when you start combining
remarkably
this message,
silent in the course of
exactly.
Ukraine. I mean, he sent out a couple of tweets. That's it. He's been remarkably silent because these are his policies and Angela Merkel's policies and Emmanuel Macron, right, to some extent, that are coming back to haunt us.
Oh, yeah, but let's, Macron, I'm very critical of Macron, but the problem with Macron is that he is a French president. And with all criticism for Macron, we should remember that his opponents are much worse.
Yeah.
When you look at the French presidential elections, that in a few days' time. So it's Macron is a leading candidate, and next second ballot will be him against Marine Le Pen. But the next three candidates, that combining vote of this Marine Le Pen, far left Mélenchon, and far right Zemmour, they combine 45-46%. They're all pro-Putin. So nearly half of the French population is supporting openly pro-Putin candidates. So that's why let's give Macron a little bit of credit, because he's not good, he's not resolute, but at least he prevents France of joining Putin's camp. It's about French voters.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, this is, to me, this is very educational, because I do think there's still a belief, especially in sort of more liberal America. And maybe even now, the factions are not that clear politically anymore, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, when it comes to this conflict. But that if we just mind our own business, we don't do anything to antagonize Putin, this is their issue. Let's stay out of it and let them fight it out. That somehow is going to protect America, that we can stay out of it. We can be more isolationist now. The Obama vision was friends. That's not happening. And then I think the Trump vision was more like talk tough, or actually, act tough, but don't talk tough. And maybe that'll get us someplace. Not exactly. And now here we are. And I think what we're learning is nothing's worked against him except for muscle. Muscle he understands, like any bully in the school ground.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we have now three consecutive presidencies, Obama, Trump, and now Biden, that had very different perspectives about America's role in the world, even from Clinton and Bush 43. Because with all the criticism what we can lay down for Clinton policies or Bush 43 policies, they were viewed themselves as the leaders of the free world. Obama, Trump, and until now, we'll see what happens with Biden administration. But originally, Biden's administration was built to also look for domestic affairs. That's the trend, and it's happened first time when they had three consecutive presidencies that wanted America to be removed from the world stage for different reasons. They were very isolationists. Yeah, and of course it changed the balance in the world and emboldened Putin's and other thugs and terrorists and dictators to grab what's America left unprotected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're seeing the effects of that foreign policy play out in front of our very eyes. All right, stand by. Quick break, and then back with Garry Kasparov, whose fascinating life story has given him so much wisdom, and we're lucky to have it here. And by the way, you can watch this show, you guys, if you want to see it visually, on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Megyn Kelly. So please check that out and download the podcast as well. Are you tired of feeling like someone's always watching you on the internet, and it's probably somebody from some company who hates you, or a criminal, or just an advertiser who knows too much about you and it's getting creepy? Or you're just concerned about the privacy of your identity, right? We've all had that feeling. By the way, using incognito mode on your phone will not solve the problem. IPVanish VPN will. They are here to protect your right to privacy and help you stay anonymous online. What you're doing online is none of anybody's business. IPVanish helps you safely browse the internet without exposing your private details to third parties, and it's at a reasonable price. So many of these companies are too pricey. This one's not. You can use IPVanish on your computers, tablets, phones, even devices like your Fire Stick when you're streaming media. And when you use IPVanish, all of your data is encrypted. This means your private details, your passwords, your communications, your browsing history, none of anyone's business again. And much, much more will be completely shielded from falling into the wrong hands. Even your physical location will be hidden. IPVanish makes you virtually invisible online. It's that simple. IPVanish is offering an incredible 70% off their yearly plan for our listeners. 70% off their yearly plan for our listeners with a 30-day money-back guarantee. That's like getting 9 months for absolute free. IPVanish is super easy to use as well. All you have to do is tap one button and you are instantly protected. Take your privacy back today with the brand rated 4.6 out of 5 on Trustpilot. Go to ipvanish.com/Megyn and use that promo code Megyn, M-E-G-Y-N, to claim your 70% savings. That's ipvanish.com/Megyn. Okay, so Garry, just a little bit on the latest in Ukraine, where the war has definitely gone a lot better for Ukraine than people could have hoped when it first started. I think the conventional wisdom was this will be over quickly in Putin's favor, and it hasn't. That's not to say that we don't hear about these atrocities coming out of Ukraine. I mean, yes, it's daily, but this week's news was particularly bad. Out of Bucha, the town of Bucha, where there are shocking reports this week of bodies littering the streets, of the bodies having civilians, this is, with hands tied behind their backs, having been shot in the head, in the back of the head. Now Western leaders calling for war crimes investigations. Of course, Russia, the Ministry of Defense says this is all fake. This is fake video and so on. That's what they said in Syria, too, when we saw similar atrocities. But American reporters from CNN and other outlets are now personally reporting they observed mass graves in the town. The mayor saying up to 300 victims may be buried there. President Zelensky's calling it genocide. President Zelensky, again, with an emotional appeal to the West to pay attention to what we're seeing. This was him speaking to the UN on Tuesday, has the voice of a female translator on it. Listen.
They killed entire families, adults and children, and they tried to burn the bodies. So where is the security that the Security Council needs to guarantee? It's not there. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to close the UN? Do you think that the time of international law is gone? If your answer is no, then you need to act immediately.
So here's what they've done, Garry. This broke just as we came on the air. U.S. just announcing new sanctions. CNN reporting the U.S. announced new sanctions Wednesday on Russian financial institutions and individuals, including Putin's 2 adult daughters, as it aims to increase economic pressure on Russia and Putin himself, following what happened in Bucha. The U.S. also announced sanctions on the wife and daughter of Putin's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. With respect to Putin's daughters, apparently we believe that he's been hiding his assets with them. That's why they are being targeted. I don't know. Does that grab you as anything impressive?
Better than nothing, but for me, it tells that there was no, and still there is no strategy in confronting Putin regime. Strategy means you know the goal. So going back to Harry S. Truman or FDR or Ronald Reagan, you knew there was a strategy. They laid down the strategy and they tried to accomplish it by using various tools at their disposal. Right now, America is still struggling to identify the goal of the war in Ukraine. For me, it should be very clear. We have to do absolutely everything to make Ukraine win. And to recover its territory. That means that we have to provide Ukraine with any weapons they need to win the war. We're not doing that. And America is still, a stumbling block in this NATO coalition. And we have to declare that all sanctions that are being now imposed on Russia will not be lifted before Ukrainian territorial integrity has been fully restored, Crimea included. That's a message that will, I think, make a lot of people in Putin's entourage thinking hard about the future. As of now, we see measures, tactics. So sanctions, first package, second package, third package. It also tells us that all stories from the White House and the state that accompanied Biden's summits with Putin. And I say summits because one summit was in person in Geneva last June, but then there were 2 very lengthy calls on video calls that I would also qualify as summits. And we were told that these calls and these meetings, the conversations, they were used by Biden and his team to warn Putin against invading Ukraine. It seemed to me that Putin didn't listen. or he just had an impression that it was just all talk, hot air, and he attacked. And while Americans told the world and Ukrainians that they prepared some hellish sanctions, it seems to me that now it's 6 weeks of war, so they're still bringing one package after another. And as for military supply to Ukraine, we are way behind of the schedule that had to be met to make Ukrainians ready to repel Russian attacks, and now to advance. And it's not just it's Biden administration. It's easy to blame politicians, but we know that Biden administration followed the advice from Pentagon and CIA. American intelligence believed that the Kyiv would fall in 4 days, 96 hours. General Milley,
and it hasn't. It still hasn't.
Yeah, it hasn't. Yeah, but General Milley, in the beginning of February, testified before the House committee. It was a closed meeting, but now remarks have been publicized. He told American lawmakers that Ukrainian army would be destroyed in 3 days. Amazing.
Yeah,
and now amazing. General Milley is telling us that the war would go for years. By the way, this is the same Pentagon that failed in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. There was also it's unbelievable failure to evaluate the situation on the ground after so many years of being there. So I wonder, so for how long people that were so wrong recently and proved to be incapable of analyzing the information from the ground, from this most sensitive parts of the global conflicts, they are now they will continue giving advice to the administration, and also it's not only just about General Milley. It's about so many experts that were wrong all these years, and now they are criticizing not only myself but others who are advocating for more aggressive policy in Ukraine, support for Ukraine, saying that we're trying to push free world into the open conflict with Russia. Again, ignoring the fact that their policies is just this embolden Putin to become more and more aggressive.
In your 2015 book, you were saying he's going to go back. He's going to invade Ukraine again. He's going, trust me, he's not done. And then you said, my detractors say the answer to my argument is, well, we don't want World War III, which is exactly what we're hearing now, right? Like this. And I talked to the guys on the other side of you on this particular issue, not you personally, but your positions. And that is exactly what they're worried about. And I understand that concern. We don't want World War III. No one wants that. But you've been saying for a long time, people use that and it's a straw man, are getting more involved in Ukraine. And you're not talking about a full ground war with American, infantry on the ground in Ukraine, but something more militarily than we're doing. You're saying that will not lead to World War III. In fact, it will help stave it off.
Look, sanctions that are now being in place, same sanctions, maybe half of them 8 years ago would have changed the game. Sanctions should be preventive. That's the nature of sanctions. So you respond to some kind of aggression, and you do your response includes sanctions that will put a price tag on any further aggression. Unfortunately, when you look at Putin's aggression, the history of Putin's aggression, all the sanctions, they were reactive and they were very weak. Obama's bragging about American sanctions in 2014, 2015. I think he said, Russian economy is in tatters now. Okay, give him a break. So Putin was laughing loud. So probably you could hear him laughing in the United States. My point was fairly simple. Either you have sanctions that could make the cost of aggression too high for Putin, or you help Ukraine to rearm, to give them weapons to defend themselves. Or you do both, but you will make clear to Putin that you're in the game. And that could have saved us from the disaster now. Now, that was exactly the argument you mentioned. Oh, you want us to be involved directly. It will drag us into World War III. The problem is the wars. If you go back to World War II, for instance, the wars with dictators began not because of the strengths of the free world, but the opposite. The war is a result of the miscalculation of a dictator who believes that he could move far without meeting adequate response. And that's why now we reached a point where we have to pay much higher price. And that's why those in Germany or in Europe who are saying, oh, we don't want to freeze. We can't afford a total embargo on Russian oil and gas export. Yes, but maybe you should recognize that it's your policy. 2 decades, Gerhard Schröder and Angela Merkel, that made Germany dependent on Russian gas. And now maybe you have to suffer a little bit. Maybe you have to pay for your mistakes, for your willingness to do business with Putin, for your politicians insisting that having Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2 would give Germany leverage over Putin, not the other way around. And now Ukrainians are paying in blood, in their lives, for your...
Can I ask you, it's not just Ukrainians, because, forgive me, but I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to pay more for my energy bill, and it's not my fault that my president struck a bad deal in Germany, and I have heart for the Ukrainians, but I got to worry about my own family, Ukrainians. But it's not just the Ukrainians. This is the point you've been trying to make all along. It's not going to stop there. That's what you've been warning. It's not going to stop.
Yes. Exactly. It's because it's right now we have a chance to stop Putin because Ukrainians are willing to make the sacrifices. They have an army that can stop and destroy Putin's war machine. Because if Putin, God forbid, wins in Ukraine, he'll move on. And then we come to the point where this is NATO, Article 5. And what's next? Are we going to defend Poland or Lithuania? With American soldiers. Now, just, make no mistake. If America follows its obligations by NATO Article 5, it will have to bring not only the planes and missiles, but boots on the ground. I don't think that it's going to happen. Article 5 is a piece of paper, and I don't believe there's any political will. It's all about, maybe we can give Ukraine enough weapons to survive. And I think that's wrong. It's morally wrong. It's politically wrong. And for those who say, no-fly zone or any aggressive U.S. policy of giving Ukraine advanced weapons like missiles that can hit Russian ships in the Black Sea. By the way, that's one of the biggest military advantage of Russia because the most powerful missiles being fired from these warships in the Black Sea. It will bring us into the war. I don't think so. There is a risk of Putin, using WMDs. Yes, there is a risk. The question is, what do we do to minimize the risk? And my answer is exactly the opposite. If we show weakness, he could get emboldened, but it's not only him, it's his generals and admirals that will believe that they can push the button, following Putin's order, use tactical nuclear or chemical weapons without being punished instantly for that. And the opposite, would be for America, for data, making it very clear that any use of WMD will be met decisively by NATO. And I bet you, again, I cannot bet my bottom dollar, and I don't want us to come to this point, but my instincts tell me that no Russian admiral, no Russian general will follow Putin's order if he knows that he will be punished not in 5 years in Hague at International Criminal Court, but in 5 minutes because a NATO missile will come back. Same with Russian pilots. If there's no fly zone, I don't think Russian pilots are kamikaze. They're not been trained to die for Putin. They're very good in bombing hospitals and other civil objects on the ground. But meeting NATO pilots in air, I doubt very much. So it's about hedging our risks. And my answer is that the strong response now, which could be costly, could be risky, but that's a result of our feckless policies over 15 years since Putin's declaration of his plans back in 2007. So it's time to recognize we miss this moment now, the price goes up. And if, God forbid, Putin, crushes Ukrainian defense and goes around and attacks NATO country, Lithuania or Poland, then we have two choices. Boots on the ground, and that will pay with the blood of American soldiers, or total capitulation. The end of NATO and total triumph for Putin. And that's, again, that will resonate not only in Europe, that will resonate in the Middle East with Iran. And of course, China will immediately look at Taiwan ready to strike.
Okay, I want to ask you about whether you think any of the sanctions that we've put in place will lead to a different result. Because I know early in this conflict, you were saying if we don't respond forcefully, we are going to see China take Taiwan. We are going to see Russia take more territory. Of course, a lot's happened since then, and there have been some pretty remarkable economic sanctions by, all of the West. So I'm wondering whether you think even those will act as a deterrent right now to Putin in doing anything else, regardless of how Ukraine comes out, because that's a lot of pain that they may not let up on. But before you comment on that, I just want to tell our audience, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about this. On March 16th, Gillian Tett in the Financial Times, she writes for the Financial Times, she's British, she posted an article, quote, "Why I Should Have Listened to Garry Kasparov About Putin." And she says you came to dinner at her house in New York a few years ago, and it was, quote, "a memorably intense evening." She said, as we dug into dessert, Kasparov told the assembled group of American policymakers and financiers how Putin was becoming increasingly authoritarian. This is years ago. Isolated from the West, and as a result, likely to lash out at neighbors such as Ukraine in a dangerous way. She writes that the rest of the table, quote, rowdily dismissed his catastrophizing, and Kasparov became heated. She said, she writes, given Kasparov's acuity in predicting current events, I called him up, I apologized for the way that we didn't listen, and I asked what he thinks might happen next. He believes Putin has already lost this battle in the sense that his key objective of swiftly annexing Ukraine has failed, and said, I don't think a Ukrainian leader could accept anything less than the return of the land in Crimea. This war will end with a Ukrainian flag on Sevastopol. But my point is, you've been dismissed by too many with your warnings about what Putin will do next. And here you are warning, if he wins, if he's allowed to declare victory, if he's allowed to keep the territories he annexed or more, I mean, God forbid, all of Ukraine, you're saying now, he'll go further. There will be more countries he'll attack, like Poland, and that's why we need to listen to you right now. So, has your prediction on that front changed at all, given the economic sanctions that the West has imposed on him?
Hopefully. So we see that the Western response to Putin's aggression is getting stronger and stronger. Again, it's still leading from behind, because we could see more atrocities. And by the way, Bucha is the first of many. It's a relatively small town. Wait until Mariupol will be liberated, and I don't know what we'll find out there. So Ukrainians are paying massive price in human lives. We're talking about thousands already. It will be in tens of thousands of lives, and they're still willing to fight. And Putin failed to take over Kiev. He failed to destroy Ukrainian sovereignty. Volodymyr Zelensky emerged as the greatest hero of our time. But Putin still has enough military to win battles in the east and the south, and to cut Ukraine from the sea, and, as you said correctly, declare victory. That's enough for him, because regimes like Putin's cannot survive military defeat. That's why it's very important for America and NATO to declare our goal of making Ukraine win this war and offering Ukraine any assistance they need. And sanctions will not be lifted until Ukrainian territory has been cleared from Russian occupation forces, Crimea and Sevastopol included. So that's the strategy that I believe can lead to the collapse of Putin's regime in Russia. And that's all we need, because as long as Putin stays in power, there will be no peace. I don't want to predict his next move, Lithuania, Poland, maybe Estonia, but he will not offer us any lasting peace, because he needs conflict. You just have to listen to Russian propaganda. It goes back to Nazi time, to Stalin's time, and it's probably even worse, because at least in the 30s or 40s, nobody could verify these lies. Now they're lying, and they know that we can check it. Just push the button on our device, so we can look at the screen, and we know that it's all lies. They don't care. So I think as long as this regime continues its its push against free will, against our civilization. So we have to recognize it's an existential threat. Because as I said, the world is getting smaller and smaller. The battle in Ukraine, which is a front line of freedom today, will resonate in the Middle East, in the Far East, China, Taiwan, everywhere in the world. So we have been seeing the steady advance of forces of darkness, totalitarianism and terrorism over the last 16 years. Ukraine can help us to turn the tide, but we have to help Ukraine, and that's why we should not, do it, step by step. We have to come up with most powerful thrust. The West can do that, and I think China, by the way, is sitting now on the fence because they saw that while the West is not doing enough for Ukraine to win, but it's enough to punish Putin and his economy. I don't think China is ready for the same challenge. But again, the outcome of the battle for Ukraine, it will define the outcome of the global battle that will continue for many years between forces of freedom and tyranny.
There are reports that we're more interested in ending it than winning it. That we just want Ukraine to end it, not to win it, and that the U.S. is pushing for a result that would look like maybe Putin gets to keep the territories he's already annexed. He keeps Crimea, he keeps these territories and then retreats, and then he gets to declare victory. We got to give him the opportunity to save face or he won't stop, is the thinking. And Ukraine, you can say, okay, we've got the territory we have left. They didn't take Kyiv. Zelensky's still in power, and probably they won't be allowed to join the European Union or NATO. Two things that were not guaranteed. We should point out to the audience, there's a lot you have to do in order to join the EU or join NATO, and there are all sorts of requirements that Ukraine, may not necessarily meet and hasn't met so far. So it was never a lock. Anyway, that's what it seems we may be pushing. Like, just give up those let him have those territories, and everyone will just call it a day.
Yes, it's. I don't know it's for a fact, but it looks like there's a powerful factions in this administration that would like to end the war because they see it as a distraction. We talked about U.S. foreign policy changing from Obama to Trump to Biden. And now Biden is he's at a nexus. He is forced to take much larger role that he wanted. The America's debacle or just retreat, stampede from Afghanistan was a result of this ideological pressure. This administration was built to address exclusively domestic affairs. It was built on a belief that, America should do as little as possible outside of the United States in the rest of the world and concentrate on the ills of the American society and push an agenda that's, to my taste, is too far left. Now, this agenda is dead. It's for many reasons, so you talked about high price of gallon of gas and of course inflation and related economic issues. That's because it's the war in Ukraine definitely has an effect. But this administration is still resisting calls to boost American domestic production. I mean, I understand that we have pressure from the Green New Deal activists, but right now we're talking about present. We're talking about, economic hardship in this country and also about, the global crisis. And we know that Putin's regime, among many other dictators, is being funded by these high oil prices. So that's the extracting more oil from American soil will help directly and indirectly in America, but also will deny Putin some of the benefits of his oil export, which unfortunately is still not banned. And of course, it's very difficult to talk about other important issues as police brutality when you look at Bucha and Mariupol. So that's why I'm under the impression that Biden is always have to make choices, and he's pressured by forces in his administration to find any solution that could end the war and let them go back to domestic agenda. I think they already missed this moment, frankly speaking. I think that after Bucha, it's impossible to force Ukrainians to accept any deal that will look like Putin's victory. So even those who would like to give Putin off ramp, I think they are no longer calling the shots And it seems to me that Biden's remarks about Putin's being a war criminal and Putin's not staying in power, for God's sake, this man should not stay in power, and then backtracked by the administration and some members of the administration, and then him repeating it. I think it's some kind of it's an indication that there's a fight inside the White House and other agencies about the policy toward Russia. And somehow I sense that Joe Biden, who was a creature of the Cold War, he was elected in the Senate half a century ago. I think his heart is in the right place, and he's trying to push it in the right direction, but he's being slowed down by others.
Yeah, he's not in charge, right? Because he makes these statements, then the White House, press team rolls them back, or the Secretary of State rolls them back, and then Biden, when he gets back to the microphone, says, "I meant every word." It's like, wait a minute, who is in charge? Who's actually calling the shots here?
Yep.
All right, listen, stand by, because next we've got to get into your background. It's so amazing, it's so fascinating, and I've watched so much stuff about your upbringing and your chess accomplishments. I've got to ask you about man versus machine and all of it. We're going to do that right after this quick break. Garry Kasparov stays with us. Do you have an account with Coinbase, or are you thinking of opening one? Do you own any Bitcoin, Ethereum, or other cryptocurrency? Cryptocurrency may indeed represent the future of money. So many brilliant people think so. It is one of the most exciting investment opportunities to come around for some time. But what about taxes? Right? Does that stress you out? It doesn't need to. Get into investing in crypto and do it in a tax-advantaged retirement account. Alto's Crypto IRA is the easy way to get crypto into an IRA. Trade all you want without the tax headache. You can create an account in just a few minutes and invest with as little as $10. No setup charges. Secure trading 24/7 through Alto's integration with Coinbase. 80 plus coins are available, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more. And industry-leading security, the advanced encryption standard, is also one of their features for wallets and private keys. So you've got security and you've got ease. They make it super, super convenient for you. Are you ready to take your investments to the next level? Diversify like the pros and trade without tax headaches. Open an Alto Crypto IRA with as little as $10. Just go to altoira.com/Megyn, M-E-G-Y-N. That's ALTOIRA.com/Megyn. Start investing in cryptocurrency today. Go to altoira.com/Megyn. Just a bit about Garry. We told you some at the top of the show. He's now 58 years old, born in Baku, Azerbaijan, in the Soviet Union in 1963. Now you live in New York City. But when you were a child, you became the under-18 chess champion of the USSR at just age 12. And the world under-20 champion at age 17, then to the surprise of no one, at the age of 22, the youngest world chess champion in history, world, at age 22, world chess champion in 1985. You defended that title 5 times. So what did your parents know that starting you in chess at a very young age was important and could develop you? I mean, I realize it was very much prized in the former Soviet Union as a sign of intellectual power and greatness. And that was one of the reasons that the USSR really loved to have all the chess champions. But is that what made your parents push you into it? Or did you show a natural aptitude right from the beginning, or both?
No, it was accidental. So you're right, stating that chess in the USSR was a very important ideological tool. It was supported by the state to demonstrate the intellectual superiority of the communist regime over decadent West. So, of course, I benefited from this state support, but it started at one of the winter evenings at home. I was 5.5, getting close to 6 years old, and watched my parents trying to solve a chess puzzle from a local newspaper, because all our newspapers had small chess section. And I was immediately fascinated by by the pieces. I didn't know chess or what, just wooden pieces. And I watched them moving these pieces, and then I learned how to make the moves. And to their surprise, so I made them just, an offer. So it was quite aggressive in pushing the idea. And my father immediately recognized that I had a different mindset, because all members of my Jewish side, my father's family, so they were all musicians, except my father. He graduated the violin class, but he ended up as being an engineer. That's how he met my mother, who was also an engineer. His last decision in his life, because tragically he died when I was 7, so from cancer, just at age 39. So the decision that he made, telling my mother that we had to send him to a chess club, not a music school. And that's how I, entered the chess network in the Soviet Union at age 7. And I climbed very, very rapidly on this chess ladder. So by age 10, I was already one of the strongest juniors in my city, Baku, which was the 4th largest city in the Soviet Union, all the way down south. And as you mentioned, at age 12, I was the junior champion under 18. So that was the best indication of great future laying ahead of me.
So you became a celebrity within the Soviet Union. I mean, people must have known you on the street. You became a worldwide celebrity. But what was that like for you? Did you know that you were a celebrity, that you were famous, that you had power that few had?
Look, chess was very popular in the Soviet Union, and being world champion, and I became world champion, as you mentioned, in 1985 at age 22, gave me a unique stature. Also, it was a time of a big change in the Soviet Union. Gorbachev took over, and he talked about openness and about changes in Soviet domestic policy, though there were much less than people thought in the free world, but still, it was like a fresh wind. So after years of stagnation under Brezhnev and his followers, two short-lived heads of the Communist Party, Andropov and Chernenko. So Gorbachev was very, very different. I had a sense that my new status, this prominence, had to be used to help my country to get better. Not that I had many ideas about democracy and how we can achieve it in Russia, but I already had a pretty good idea about the rest of the world, because my first trip abroad was in 1976 when I was just 13 to France to play World Championship under 16. And then in 1977, I had another trip to France to play just the same event a year later. I came back knowing that, there was something wrong in the Soviet Union, because I could immediately see the difference. And I felt that, we had to make changes to turn our country into something more pleasant, because I had to play by the rules. I wanted to become world champion, but in the back of my mind, I thought that the moment would come when I could use my acquired glory to help others to rally for the support of democracy, and that's what I did.
Little did that Garry Kasparov know that, within 30 years you would be allegedly on an assassination list from the Russian president, who, is said to want to target you because you've been so outspoken in pushing for democracy. And critical of him. I mean, it's crazy to think of. It's not something anybody over here would ever worry about with respect to a U.S. president, but it just underscores the difference between how our two countries have chosen to live or are living. One of the things I've heard you talk about in playing the chess, which I thought was very interesting, because I don't know anything about chess, but you're fascinating, is how much exertion goes on during, especially, for you, every match is big, but during the big matches in particular, the number of calories that are burnt, the number of stress that you're under, that there have been studies of this. Because, I see two guys sitting playing chess. I don't think of exertion. I think of mental taxation, but I don't think of exertion. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it seems very innocuous when, as you said, two guys sitting there just in front of each other playing chess. It's or it could be two girls or just a boy and a girl playing chess. But there's a huge pressure because the mental pressure just somehow affects your body. And if it's a long match, when I say long match, you play many games. So 12 games, 14 games against the same opponent. When I played Anatoly Karpov, we played 24 games. So that took weeks. So with all the with rest days, every second day was a rest day. So we played for 2 or 3 months. And our first match actually, it was unlimited number of games. We played for nearly 5.5 months.
Wow.
So it's not just a game. It's the several hours you spend at the board. It's about preparation. It's about living under this pressure, because you go you go back to bed, and you're still thinking about the moves you made in the previous game or the moves you will make in the next game. You eat. You still your mind is still very much it's very tense, and it's the way I played, I just couldn't escape from the images of chess pieces, and I was always working. For me, the whole tournament, the whole match, 10 games, 12 games. So this is 2 weeks, a month. It was always like one event. So that's why it was a physical exertion, and I burned calories, I lost weight, but I did a lot of physical exercise. So the reason I stayed on top for nearly 20 years, it's because I even in my late 30s, so I was better prepared for this physical challenge than my younger opponents.
Do men ever play against women?
Yeah, it's now we play. So this is most of the games, it's won by men. But Judith Polgar, the strongest female player ever.
That is, because it's not something it's not like an obvious thing where, if a man plays a woman in competitive elite tennis, he's going to crush her. And we all understand why. But, there's no inherent intellectual benefit to being a man over being a woman. So why do you think that is? Look,
I'm not, here just to analyze the details of this outcome. But the fact is that, it's this, there was only one female player that made it to top 10, Judith Polgar, so Hungarian grandmaster. And, she stayed there for quite a while. So she was probably at the best moment, number 8 in the world, 7 or 8 in the world. And no other female player made it, it's probably just the Chinese champion, Hu Yifan. She made it to probably top 80. But other female players, they are just between top 100 to 200. Though I have to say that when we look at the trend, it has been, the gap has been closing, because at the days of Bobby Fischer believed that he could beat any female player, by giving the handicap of a whole piece. Now, no serious player would be considering, giving any handicap. Though again, it's the male players, they just dominate the game, and it's probably again, it's about traditions. It's about the roots of the game. So as any game, it has been played by men, and if we continue with the same path, so seeing the gap is getting closer and closer. So we can see that at one point, it will become more competitive than now.
Is there ever any chit chat with your opponent? Like, could a romance blossom? I'm just wondering. It seems like all those weeks together, something could happen.
Look, the game, it's the serious game. If we're talking about serious game, so you don't communicate with your opponent. So that's a bad taste. If you play some exhibition matches, that's another story. But you talk to your opponents if you wish after the game, and this is often we analyze together. But the game itself, it's a serious challenge. Look,
so this is no place for women to get their MRS degree. What's that?
Megyn, I stopped playing professional chess 17 years ago. Though I still do, just appearances. I play exhibition matches. But I think this is, with so many changes in the game of chess, this rule of just not communicating to your opponent, it still stays.
Well, I know that I've heard you say you can't compare today's chess players to the Garry Kasparovs or the Bobby Fishers of the world because we know so much more about chess today than we used to. And some of what we know came from you, came from people watching you.
Yep.
And what do you mean by that? Explain that.
Oh, it's about a knowledge that is just being accumulated. It's just, think of a student, it's a college student who's studying physics or math. So, he or she knows much more than Newton or Einstein, but it's not a result of them being a genius, but it's the fact that there's so much data had been accumulated and they just, they know how to apply it. Same with chess. Bobby Fischer played chess 50 plus years ago, and he came up with new ideas that were revolutionary. This idea is now just a part of the common knowledge of a 12-year-old international master.
Wow.
And they also have computers now. This is one of the biggest shifts in the game of chess was use of the computers, because now you have machines that can help you to prepare for the game. Of course, it's illegal to use machines during the game, though that's one of the challenges for modern chess, how to make sure that there's no communication between a player and a remote computer or just a phone, because if you have now chess app on your phone, it's stronger than Deep Blue. But machines force top players, actually all professional players, to reconsider the way they're preparing for the game. So that's why you have now young players, and I've been working a lot with them. So Kasparov Chess Foundation has been founded in this country in America 20 years ago. We'll celebrate our 20th anniversary next November. And for the last 17 years, we've been working with talented American kids. So I can proudly say we had 17 grandmasters. Actually, it's in the United States that came out of our program. And I could see quite a dramatic change in their attitude, the way they look at the position, they analyze it. I'm not saying it's good or bad, better or worse. It's just different. Because I used to, to rely on my intuition. Just, I try to always go deep down to understand the rationale of certain moves and certain patterns. They very much depend on the machine. It's like, following the computer, makes them somehow more mechanized. Mm-hmm. It's not only about chess. It's just, I think it's widespread. A lot of people, they can't take their eyes away from computer. And that's what I believe it makes the difference between, an average decision maker and a great decision maker. Because the great decision maker knows this is the moment where I have to stop looking at the screen and make a decision, stop collecting data and decide how to apply my human intuition. So to add human qualities into the overall process.
That's fascinating. Well, because one of the things that makes you so brilliant and interesting to listen to, and probably the reason that you've gotten so many predictions right, is you're not just a chess grandmaster, you're a strategy grandmaster. That's really what an amazing chess player is. A master of strategy and being able to see several moves ahead and anticipate the other person's moves. That's what you're an expert in. And so it seems to me that that's a skill you have been able to apply outside of the chess world to great advantage in your life.
Yeah, okay. It's, if you consider, being dismissed for 15 plus years as an advantage, yes. Yes, you're right. Yes. Yeah.
Well, it's not your fault. People haven't listened.
Look, I try to see the big picture. I mean, I also know the limitations of my knowledge. So that's just, again, the limits of my ignorance. So I'm not very good at micromanagement, and I just, I stay away from things that I'm not comfortable with to exercise my authority and I know where my credibility ends. But I'm very good at and looking at the big picture and especially geopolitical picture. And I've been now, everything I said now, so I've been saying today. So it's a result of this analysis. Not necessarily I'm right all the time, but I can feel the trends and I can see the patterns. And I know that some of the predictions, they sound too aggressive, it's like, this very bellicose, because the language of deterrence is a rough one. It's not soft. It's not comfortable. It's not appeasement. It's not let's live in peace and do business. But, it's about us recognizing that there's certain moments in history where it's black and white. I heard it so many times. Mr. Kasparov, you're a chess player. You don't understand that the life is not about black and white. It's gray. It's 50 shades of gray. You have to, you have to accept this fact. Your direct approach, good and bad, good and evil, that doesn't apply. I agree that in many instances, you have to be very cautious in offering radical solutions. But we are right now at a point where it's all black and white. So it's as simple as good and evil. And Ukrainian war simply demonstrated us that, we reached a point, sort of like a climax, the moment in history where we have to make some big decisions. But unlike chess, still black and white, but no draw. You cannot end this game in a tie.
Right.
Because when you have our values, our belief in freedom, in the rights of individuals for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And on the other side, you have something totally opposite. Believe in violence, and the rights of those in power to subjugate others and to attack others at the moment they think they can get away with that. So there's no tie. We cannot end this
moral
game.
relativism can be dangerous.
No, absolutely. This is no moral. This is not a game where you have black and white pieces, because it's not about same pieces of different color. It's about set of values that cannot coexist.
Okay, so last question: was it hard to hang it up? Because I know you did it for so many years. You were the world champion your name is synonymous with chess, and you brought it into the mainstream with the match against the IBM computer and all that. The first one of which he won, noted for the record, and only the second one that went the wrong way. The whole movies have been made about that, by the way, but forget that. Was it hard to hang it up? Because I know you did it for a good purpose, but was it hard?
Look, by the way, speaking about the second match was IBM, yes, I was really angry and upset by losing in 1997. And I thought it would be a curse that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Now I believe it was a blessing, because I was the first human being who had his job, threatened by a machine. So this is intelligent worker. And I could live, with this knowledge, and I could, learn a lot, and eventually I become a proponent of human-machine collaboration. So that's about, your failures and your ability to learn from the failures. So that's why I think now it was more like a blessing that I was part of this experiment, and now I could share my unique expertise with others. Now, speaking about 2005 decision to leave chess. No, it was not that difficult, because what I learned, from my early days, from my late mother, was that it's not just about winning. Yeah, of course it was winning, but it's not just winning. It's about making a difference. It's about, making contribution to the game. It's about expanding the horizons. And I knew by age 40 that, I almost exhausted my ability to make the difference. Winning still, I could have done probably for a few more years, but what's the point? So I saw an opportunity to apply my fame and my expertise, my analytical skills, my energy, for a better cause. And that was my desperate attempt to save Russian democracy, feeble democracy, but save it from an impending disaster, because I already saw the rise of darkness, and I had no doubt that, Vladimir Putin would become an existential threat, not only for Russian democracy, but for the rest of the world, if given the chance.
Well, I'm quite certain that there are many, many Russians who are so grateful to you for using your platform in the way you have. And we're grateful to you for being with us again today. Garry Kasparov, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Megyn.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Tomorrow, we're going to dig deep into the Hunter Biden story and the updates in it that the mainstream media has been burying. You know, the laptop and all the evidence on it. Well, there's a lot more to the story that you won't see reported on CNN, but we're going to get into it when Senator Ron Johnson, who's been sort of running herd on this, joins us to bring us the latest directly. Don't forget to download The Megyn Kelly Show on Apple, Pandora, Spotify, and Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast for free. Also, go ahead and subscribe to the show at youtube.com/Megyn Kelly. That would help me out if you would subscribe to both shows, the podcast and the YouTube version. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow.